For thousands of years, we have been struggling with the evil that once took over the world. Territory wars, power struggle, corruption, slavery, and manipulation. The creation of the unconscious man ultimately led to the emergence of divisions in society. That's why today, looking at what's happening in the world, it's hard to believe that although we were all born of love, man was able to turn it into hatred. But is the reality we are experiencing now the only possible reality? And what if the world we have created is just an unconscious manifestation of our limited perspective? And what if there is a truth that can set us free from suffering once and for all? Welcome to my channel and thank you for choosing to watch this video. Dear viewer, certainly like all of us, I also have a mission to fulfill in this present life. And more precisely, each of us was born under a particular zodiac sign that symbolizes our strengths. So I, as a zodiacal twin or Gemini, have the gift of communication. Therefore, my task is to transform the acquired information into valuable knowledge so that I can then pass it on to others. But in order to be able to pass on my knowledge to others, I first had to learn to delve into myself and look for understanding and meaning of all past events and interactions. And that means I had to learn to draw conclusions from my personal experiences to then transform them into life wisdom so that I could ultimately share it with you through these recordings. So let me briefly share with you how this kind of process actually looks like. So there are times in my life when I completely disconnect myself from the rest of the world, so that in silence, I can analyze all the information I have previously gathered. And here I mean the information that manifests itself in the form of, for example, signs, symbols, and messages I receive in my dreams, but also memories of conversations with some significant people I meet along the way, signs in nature, or spontaneous visions I get during meditation, but also sudden enlightenments of the mind that I experience during daily observation and contemplation. And if you have watched my previous videos, you probably already know that I can perceive the essence of things from many different perspectives. And so, thanks to this extraordinary ability, I can see the hidden depth and meaning of all things. Therefore, let me emphasize, the knowledge I possess is not a new philosophy or an attempt to create controversy. This truth has always existed and has been waiting for those who are ready to discover it, to know it. And since it's our time to remember who we really are, today, I'm here sharing this knowledge with you so that we can return to our nature and together create and live fully consciously this beautiful experience of life here on earth. And this means that today you will finally learn what is the true concept and meaning of our life in three-dimensional reality. But before we even begin, I must warn you. The subject matter of this recording is very deep, which at first may seem a bit complicated or difficult to understand. Nevertheless, I assure you that this is perfectly normal, since the picture of reality that has been presented to us so far differs significantly from the truth that I'm about to reveal to you today. Therefore, know that even if not today, eventually everything will make perfect sense, because that's just the way things are. Therefore, I cordially invite you to listen what I have to say to you today. In the theoretical part of this video, we have identified the zero dimension as a point that we said is the foundation of our creation. And if you remember, I called this point I am. So today, my main goal is to explain to you what this point really is and why is it so important to us. And for this purpose, I'm going to quote some examples from the theoretical part, which then I will develop in the form of more practical examples, which I hope will allow you to combine science with spirituality, because thanks to this, you'll be able to understand much more deeply the meaning and significance of the information I will give you today. And so eventually you'll be able to implement it into your personal life. So if you are ready, let's move on to the first part of this recording. The word dimension comes from the Latin word dimetri, dimensio, and means to measure something. And here's an example we can give the observer and the observed object. In this case, our dimension is the designated road between the observer and the observed object. So as you can see, dimension is not a place where we can go, but a measurement of some surface. In the theoretical part, we also said that the zero dimension is a point. However, if we look at our point from a perspective of a higher dimension, we can also see that it's a sphere, and the sphere has two poles, one positively charged and the other negatively charged. Also, one of them is called alpha, which is a Greek word meaning the beginning, and the other is called omega, which means the end. And although they are opposite to each other, they intuitively know that in order for something to begin, something must end. Therefore, both poles must connect with each other, and this means they will have to make a move. And the faster they move, the more likely they are to experience itself in higher dimensions. And therefore, thanks to the speed and smoothness of this rotational motion, we have the ability to perceive one object from different perspectives or in different dimensions. So let me give you an example. If the object that I'm observing from the perspective of its surface, and here, for example, let's take a bottle. So if the bottle that I'm observing at this point is my only reality, it doesn't mean that there is no other reality there. Because apart from the volume of its surface, which I'm currently observing, we also have time during which our object changes. And this means from the beginning of its creation, its inception, and so on up to the present moment, this bottle has also made its own history. Or let's take a house as an example. A simple house with 4 walls, floor, and a roof. Each of the mentioned parts is directed in a completely different direction. The roof faces upwards, therefore it will never know what's down there. The floor is facing downwards, so it will never know what's up there. In turn, each of the walls is directed in a completely different direction, so there is no way to see what's on the other side. But despite such a large variety of perspectives, it's still one and the same house
that consists of many dimensions.
And that's why we say we live in a multi-dimensional world and that we are multi-dimensional beings. And if you remember from the first part, we said that everything within the universe remains in constant motion. And more precisely, it was explained on the basis of string theory, according to which the whole creation was defined by tiny supersymmetrical strings that vibrate at different frequencies, producing all sorts of visual effects. We have also said that these strings are either open or closed in nature. So now we know that the string remains open before the two poles come together and closed once they come together to form a string.
And so it's with our sphere. When the sphere comes into motion, it will automatically stretch in a straight line so that it can connect one pole to another. And this means it's no longer zero-dimensional, but one-dimensional, because the sphere has just traveled some distance.
So the concept of the first dimension says that there is only one point in the universe that is multiplying by 2. And these are the two poles I just mentioned. And since we said that everything has its two poles, each of us also have them. Hence the concept of dual nature arose. And as a human, we say that each of us has a positive and negative side. However, in fact, it's related to our body structure, and you will learn much more about it later in this video. So, as we can see, although there are opposites of each other, they don't separate from one another, but merge, because together they form one coherent whole. So now, back to the example of our house described earlier. It doesn't matter what part of the house you are and what direction you're facing, because it's still one house that consists of many dimensions, and you're a part of all of them. And I said it's not important because the only truth is that everything that exists in the universe is only the illusion of one point moving, and moving very fast. And this in turn causes all sorts of visual effects, just like the vibrating strings we said. Therefore, if each of us realizes that we are not only human, but a part of everything, then we will become a dreamer or creator of our own reality. Think about it for a moment. If you were able to make the character that you are now, you should also be able to transform it into your improved version, my friend. And so this uninterrupted movement is a creator living his own dream, a creator whose possibilities are infinite and unlimited. Therefore, the energy that creates this movement is also infinite and unlimited. And we humans call this energy love. Unconditional love that allows the dreamer to create his dream and experience that dream. Therefore, the first dimension is not something we can live in, because this dimension is rather a concept of understanding that we are one and that we have the opportunity to live our dream together, feeling loved because we emerged from love. And when we actually feel this oneness, unity and love, then we will be connected to the essence of the first dimensional ground, which is the creator of all this emerging creation. And we humans call it God. So the key word for the first dimension is the word oneness or love. And here, let me cut in. I want to share something interesting with you. Right after experiencing your spiritual awakening, you begin to see everything in a completely different light. So you suddenly realize how much of a limited life you have lived so far. And then you have the thought or feeling that there is still so much to discover that you actually allow or let this new path of development totally absorb you. And when you finally reach this, say, the highest possible level, then you realize that it was all still just a fiction, illusion. All these levels, labels, names, statuses, religions, traditions, divisions, all this doesn't actually exist. And it doesn't have to exist. It was just your still limited perception of perceiving everything. And do you know why? Because being human, we are designed to believe that this something exists. So by giving something a name or putting a label on it, we will actually be able to believe that it's real. And then we teach each other to perceive that thing in the same way by giving it a name. And so imagining and believing that it actually exists together, we manifest its physical form. That's why we all perceive it just as it has been described to us. Magical, right? Or in other words, let me explain in other words. When designing an image of something in the universe, we are only designing our need to make sense of its existence, which of course is only one dimension or point of view of this reality.
And this is what actually brings us down to the only reality, which is only one point with two poles, positive and negative.
Therefore, no matter what example of an object I give you, no matter how I describe and name it, because in fact, it's only my or our view of perceiving something in only one dimension, which is the first dimension. So, without the first dimension, we wouldn't actually be able to create an image of everything to which we assign all these labels and attributes, right? That's why it's equally important dimension. But before we even gave it any form, we had to start somewhere, right? That's why we said that everything starts from the zero dimension, which is just a point or a dot. And we also said that our point in higher dimensions will change and transform depending on the perspective of our view. So in reality, everything we create in our imagination is only the possible potential of our point. On the other hand, however, considering the fact that one point is not able to experience it all at once, therefore it has to create other objects in order to be able to experience its own potential. And that's when we come into play. I hope that everything is clear for now. And if not, bear with me, because we are just getting to the most interesting part of this video. And I promise it will all make much more sense. So stay with me. In the theoretical part, we said that the first dimension is a line segment or segmenting line. If, on the other hand, we double its vertices, we get a flat figure, a figure that occupies a certain area of the plane. So now we will call this plane the architectural plan of the universe. Therefore, the two-dimensional plane shows us the basis of something that we can build from our opposite poles. And here we must remember that in order to create harmony or order in our architectural plan, we must close our project, right? So to close our project, we will have to create something that will allow us to connect our poles together, and hence the creation of a plane figure, which automatically becomes our basis of the third dimension. And as an example of plane figure in the theoretical part, we gave a square. Thus, the two-dimensional square, which consists of 4 straight lines with 2 opposite poles that connect with each other, is our basis for creating a cube. A cube, which in other words, is two-dimensional square viewed from a three-dimensional perspective. And this begs the question, what makes us see this square now as a cube? Intuition. Let me explain. I said that everything in the universe has a beginning and an end. So every project, every object intuitively knows that once it has started, it also has to end somewhere to create a sense, which in other words means one coherent whole. And that's why we need intuition to sense where our end is, so that we can close our project. But we also need imagination so that we know where we are going with this project. So when building the foundations for something, we also have to imagine what our project will ultimately look like to be a finished project. And that means we must give it some meaning. Therefore, the key word for the second dimension is imagination. Since we said that the second dimension is our architectural plan of the universe, or the basis for building something, it means that when drawing something on a plane, we must use our imagination to get a bigger picture of what we actually want to create. So the second dimension is an image or manifestation of what will happen in other dimensions, in higher dimensions. On the other hand, however, from a logical point of view, we say that it's a combination of lines and dots that together make up a flat figure. So now let me explain the same based on our life experience. As a newborn baby, it's like starting from 0 dimension. You know nothing. So in the beginning, you have to learn how to function in the world around you. And you do it intuitively, using your senses. So you touch different objects, you observe your surroundings, you listen to different frequencies or vibrations of energy that more experienced beings call speech, language, or words. So when you learn all of this, it's like connecting the dots that will eventually form the picture of the reality you're experiencing. A reality that later in your life you will give meaning to. So we can say that we create our own architectural plan, thanks to which we learn how to function in this three-dimensional world. And as we can guess now, in fact, at some point in our childhood, there is a moment that we finally close our plan project. we learned how to communicate. We learned how to name things, how to name our needs. And this means we put it all together. So now we know how to function here, right? And then comes the next stage, the stage of building various kinds of relationships. And let's say these are the teenage years, when we learn different feelings through interaction with another person or group of people. Feelings that we also connect with each other, like these dots. And then, based on them, we start to build platonic or illusory relationships. And why did I say platonic or illusory? Because our feelings for another person are really just our imagination. Since we are just learning to recognize and name feelings, it's obvious that at first everything will be just our fantasy. So we can say that our imaginations and feelings are exaggerated. And here again, we must return to the 0 point of our architectural plan, because we had to start somewhere. But we also intuitively know that we must close, so it all makes sense. So first, we learn different feelings by interacting with different people. And then, using our imagination, we start to create various kinds of expectations. Expectations that we project onto others, so that we can close the story of our imagination. In other words, to make sense of it. So, let me give you an example. I believe that I'm in love with some particular person because, say, I like him physically. But the truth is, I don't know him. So, in order to be able to close my imagination, that is to give it sense to my plan, I start to create a story between us. A story that will make me believe that this is my person, my end of the story, my man. And here, for example, I tell myself that he's similar to me in character, so we will probably get along. Or he has the same interests, so together we'll be able to build, for example, a joint business in the future. Okay, so now let's say I finally get to know him. So we arrange one meeting, we arrange a second, a third, but all of a sudden it turns out that he's not what I imagined him to be. And this automatically means that I'm unable to close my plan, my project, my imagination. And since we don't resonate with one another, it's obvious that we stop seeing each other. And so I, again, feel the need to find that someone or something to help me close my project so that I can feel fulfilled, whole. And this is how I try once, twice, 3 times, 10s. And although I still haven't found my ending, I notice that with every relationship, or simply with every person I meet, I learn something new about myself. And so I'm beginning to understand more and more what I actually expect from such relationship. What means a relationship with another person to me? What can I accept and what I cannot? So in reality, it's not about building a relationship with another person, but learning and understanding yourself through another person. And then comes the next stage in our life. So the stage when, let's say, we're already more experienced in building relationships with other people. So we are finally able to close this period of imagining a specific relationship with another person, because with the current experience, I'm already able to predict how my acquaintance with a given person will develop. Therefore, we become more selective, demanding, or picky as you prefer. So our circle of friends becomes smaller with time because now we have enough information to know what serves us and what doesn't. So our project is finally closing. In the beginning, we were learning to relate to others. So we imagined how our relationship with someone could develop. And so, gaining experience, we have learned to distinguish truth from illusion. And with that, we have finally created a concrete outline of what will actually help us to close our project. So to connect all the dots together. So we no longer create overly illusory ideas about something or someone that would supposedly satisfy us, because now we know what exactly we expect. What we expect from a person, from life, from a relationship. And so with the next stage of our lives, we open a new project. And this means we start all over again, except that now we already have some experience. So now, with all the experience we have gained, we learn to live our life differently. So for example, we feel like trying some new things. Of course, we want to test our body anew. We make new friends, but now we have some boundaries set. Also, guidelines for the environment of people we want to surround ourselves with, so that it serves our development. And so until old age, which is the next stage, the stage when we cherish our bonds again. For example, with our children or grandchildren, after which we eventually begin to think about what will happen to us after our physical death. So we unconsciously try to close, but also to open a new project or stage again. And so to infinity, because something begins so that it can end and start again. And here I would like us to bring something very important to our attention. We live in a society that from an early age programs us with the belief that using our imagination is a bad way to live. And by the way, you will learn much more about how important it's to skillfully use our imagination from this video. So society forces us to adapt to some predetermined rules of conduct. And so over time, we unconsciously become conditioned to live according to these imposed rules. And then we automatically lose our sense of imagination, and consequently we are unable to design our life the way we would like it to be. In other words, with the beliefs that have been instilled in us, our ability to imagine becomes very limited, even blocked. Therefore, we stop using consciously because we have been taught that life is what it is and not what we imagine it to be. And here also, I would like to draw special attention to the fact that any beliefs and rules of conduct that have been instilled in us are really just someone's illusory image of a very limited life. And it seems to us that this is the reality, the only reality, because we were all programmed the same way. So, for example, in early childhood, we were told that we must follow a certain religion and follow some of its rules of conduct. And we must because That's what everyone does. On the other hand, however, when people, say later in life, disagreed with any of these imposed rules, then they formed their own beliefs. And that, of course, meant going against someone else's rule. And that's where all the fabricated stories about God punishing us for our sins arose. So in fact, all the stories were created to scare people, because a man who lives in fear is easy to manipulate. And that means he will eventually submit to someone else's rule. And therefore this illusory vision of life has been passed down from generation to generation, so that we never have a chance to discover any other reality. And as the universe continues to evolve, with it, we're also undergoing our own transformation. Unfortunately, it turns out that this doesn't change the fact that all these beliefs or rules of conduct that once arose today look a bit different. In fact, they still limit our perception to only one reality. That's the truth. So now, to put it all that I have just described together, I want you to visualize a straight line.
Because that's what our life actually is. We never go backwards. We always go straight ahead. So by dividing our life into certain stages, we also divide our line.
And so each stage becomes a separate dot, because unfortunately in life we haven't been taught to connect each of the stages. Quite the opposite. We have been taught to separate ourselves from what we have experienced in the past. And here, let me give you an example. When we turn 18, our parents or guardians tell us that childhood is over and now we have to start taking life seriously. And here, by the way, imposing on us some rigorous image of what adult life looks like to them. So again, we must give up our own life project because we must submit to someone else's vision of life, right? Of course, now we know that in fact we don't have to do anything, but the truth is the unconscious mind doesn't know it. And so when we cut ourselves off from a given stage, we automatically lose that sense of connection, of oneness. And this means that by separating each of the stages from each other, we automatically lose the vision of our life project. So in order to restore this natural balance to our life, we actually need to connect each of the stages together to be able to give it meaning. And that's what actually I have been teaching in my previous episodes, sharing with you my experiences that, by the way, I have described in detail. I was teaching you how to connect all the dots to eventually get a complete picture of what we have been building all along. So now, to conclude what I just said, if you stop using your imagination, you won't be able to expand your life project. In other words, to open yourself to something new, something unknown. You won't be able to reach further horizons. You will never awaken the thought or feeling that there might be much more than just that. Therefore, your life experience will be limited only to what others have told you. So you will live a very limited life. And the same goes for building relationships. If you get burned several times, and you will eventually say that everyone is the same. You may even stop believing in true love. That automatically means you will close all doors to meeting someone who could prove valuable, my friend. The same in the case of our mind. And here I mean our beliefs, traditions, rules of conduct, or our views simply. If we limit ourselves to just one possibility or line of thought, we automatically limit our ability to expand our perspective of seeing reality. Or generally speaking, chance to discover other information. Information that we can obtain, for example, by learning about these other cultures, about their beliefs, traditions, views. If we don't open ourselves to something new, we won't even give ourselves the opportunity to try something that could turn out to be much better than what we believed so far. Don't you think? But let's also remember that when we open ourselves to something new, this doesn't mean that we have to change or give up our own views or traditions. After all, we can just look at it from a different perspective. And for example, think that if I get to know other beliefs and traditions, then maybe I'll be able to expand with some new information my own beliefs and traditions. So this will help me develop to some extent, which means I will make progress in my personal development. That's why, let me repeat myself again. In order to complete our project, we must use our imagination so that we can ultimately give meaning to our life. Besides, everything is only an illusion anyway, so all the more we should create this illusion of life ourselves, so that our experience is what we want it to be and not what others want us to believe it is. I think we can now unanimously admit that our life so far has been very limited indeed. Since we have lived only one way of life, now knowing that the number of potential realities is actually infinite, it's true that our life, it's a fictional life. But the fact that we now know the truth, of course, doesn't change the fact that our life will continue to be illusory. After all, it's all just a figment of our imagination, which manifests the physical form of what's going on in our mind. However, now that we are aware of this truth, we can create and experience this illusion of life, this dream, in a much more interesting way, don't you think? And so this is how we come to the third dimension, which is the dimension of depth, or depth dimension. So let me explain to you what our three-dimensional reality really is. And for this purpose, let me remind you first.
The zero dimension we set is a point, which is really a bipolar sphere, positively and negatively charged. One pole is called alpha and the other is called omega. The same sphere seen in motion from a different perspective simultaneously becomes a straight line, which in the second dimension takes shape and turns into a flat figure with two dimensions, length and width.
However, when we add the third dimension to it, then we get a three-dimensional figure, which will be, for example, the aforementioned cube.
So as you can see, all dimensions are closely related. One is born from the other, which means that one cannot exist without the other. That's why we say there is only one dimension seen from different perspectives. The other such important point is that until we add depth to our measurements, we cannot call it an object. And that means it will only be a measurement of some surface.
So the question is, what is depth? And why does it give so much importance to our space measurements?
Maybe let's start with the fact that the word depth or profound comes from the Latin word profundus, which more precisely means going into depth.
Okay, going into depth, but what does that mean? How can you do it? How can this be achieved? The answer is, we will obtain the depth by duplicating the prototype of our base. In other words, from the combination of the first dimension with the second dimension, which through fractalization, which means repeating the same pattern endlessly, ultimately will create the illusion of depth. And that's how we get our three-dimensional image. And even more plainly, no matter what our object is, its construction begins with two opposite poles that connect to each other because they intuitively know that they have to end somewhere so that they can start again. And because of their connection, we obtain a certain flat surface, which at the same time takes the shape of a flat figure. However, now we also know that this flat figure, by duplicating its own prototype, as a result, gives us a higher dimension, which is the third dimension. And it's thanks to the third dimension that actually matter or physical body comes into existence. And here comes the question: what is a human body, our body?
The human body is also matter made of atoms, which include, among others, positively charged protons and negatively charged electrons. Whereas during the fractalization process, it becomes an illusory hologram. In other words, a three-dimensional image of an object.
So that's what our body actually is. On the other hand, if we wanted to explain the dimension of depth from the point of view of our mind, you could say that by delving into some concept, we would eventually get to its depth, which in other words means to its meaning. And then we would automatically create matter. So our next question is, why were we designed as a three-dimensional entity? Why not four or two? We were designed as a three-dimensional entity to seek, but also to experience the deep meaning of the concept of all creation. And as you can see, I said deep meaning, which is the aforementioned depth that gives us an image of three-dimensional space. Therefore, in this dimension, by seeking its own deep meaning, the mind has the ability to understand itself. Because when the mind understands itself, then it will be able to play with itself. And that means change and transform into ever different, ever better version of itself. So in reality, everything we have ever called real, as you can see, was just one of an infinite number of potential realities that we could create for ourselves. So in fact, everything is just an illusion created by our mind. And this actually perfectly explains the very word illusion that comes from the Latin word illusio, meaning to play. So it's true that our mind is actually playing with us by creating various illusory images of something. Therefore, the fact that we feel, touch, see or hear something specific is also just an illusion. Because in reality, all that we feel with our senses or experience with our senses is only the contact of electrons with protons. So, my dear viewer, our life is actually a dream. A dream that is a reality, and a reality that is a dream. And now I guess in this belief you're surely asking yourself, how does something you see, hear, touch or feel can be an illusion? Since you're watching me right now, you can hear what I'm saying and you surely feel some emotions. Let me explain. Actually, I have already talked about it before. The fact that we can touch, feel, see or hear something is due to our senses. On the other hand, the fact that we assign labels or names to something, the fact that we see certain shapes or that we hear certain specific sounds is the result of our early programming. And more specifically, the first stage of life in this three-dimensional reality, which is the period when we were taught how to name objects we see, how to perceive the frequencies we hear, which is something we said that we call voice, words or language, but also how to perceive the vibrations we feel, which we call, for example, feelings or sensations. And although when looking at a given object, we may all perceive it differently because from the perspective of how our surroundings presented or described this something to us, in the end, we all call this given object by the same name. And it's exactly the same with the language we communicate or the feelings we feel. So as you can see, it's all just an illusion we have created, we humans. All these names, labels, languages, beliefs, views, structures, patterns, etc., etc. In reality, all this doesn't exist. It's just man's invention, his imagination. Thus the concept of the third dimension is to experience yourself and life in three-dimensional reality. And that's why we say that the third dimension is the sensory aspect of all dimensions. So the universe or God, our point dot, in order to be able to experience itself, it fractalizes its prototype. And this prototype, seen from different perspectives or the dimensions, gives an illusion or an image of different form, where in reality it's still just one dot or a point. Hence we said that the universe in which we live is the result of God's creation. So in fact, the third dimension is the only aspect of reality where all other dimensions can experience their own creation. And this means that it's not some external being who creates our reality so that we can experience it, but we ourselves in a different reality bend time and space in order to create ourselves so that we can experience what we are experiencing. That's why we say that the third dimension is the fruit of our creation, because once again, only here we can experience ourselves. On the other hand, however, if we don't live a balanced life in harmony in this three-dimensional reality, then we won't be able to cross other dimensions, higher dimensions. Therefore, our goal is to learn from all kinds of experiences how to love life here in the third dimension. Also learn how to use and enjoy our senses in order to learn to enjoy our reality, which, by the way, we create ourselves. So the more we enjoy our present reality, the more we'll be able to see all the potential realities that we will be able to create for ourselves, regardless of what we are experiencing at this very moment. And the way you become aware of it is the moment when your life becomes coherent between what you think and what you feel. Otherwise, you will only experience pleasure in one of these aspects. So, in order for you to feel fulfilled, you actually have to achieve consistency, achieve balance. And here, let me tell you something very important. If in your present life you're experiencing only pain, it doesn't mean that God is punishing you. That's not true. These are some old religious beliefs of people who had no awareness or very little awareness. People who believed that going to heaven would be liberation from this trap of life, where in fact your pain or bad experiences are simply the result of lack of harmony, lack of balance between all aspects. And seeing reality in only one dimension, so as you have been told by others, you automatically manifest to your reality the exact image of what you believe it's real. That's why your life is no different. So, the moment you achieve full harmony between your mind and your heart, that's when your suffering will end. My dear viewer, I hope it's now clear that both the promise of life after death, which is the ascension to heavens, but also the existing theories in a spiritual sense about ascending to the fourth or fifth dimension, saying that our life will suddenly become like a fairy tale. Both beliefs are just a human invention. Thus, they are only an illusion created by a man who, due to experiencing lack of harmony here in three-dimensional world, felt the need to create something that would give him a sense of salvation from pain, suffering, and ultimately a sense of completion of his life project. Or in other words, he couldn't achieve harmony in three-dimensional reality, and therefore he created some concept of a better world, believing that this other world would free him from the pain he was experiencing here. Where in fact, the only truth is that you will only be free from suffering by achieving harmony in this three-dimensional reality you are currently experiencing. Otherwise, every next life cycle you start, you will relive in pain and suffering. So, in reality, death is also just an illusion, just to let you know. Because it's true that you never die and you're never born. You always have been and always will be. You just take different forms with each new life cycle you start. On the other hand, however, the fact that you emerge from your biological mother's womb, in reality, is the materialized result of fractalization of your own prototype. So this whole process of pregnancy and childbirth also is just a beautiful creation of our imagination, which, thanks to our faith and of course imagination, can manifest in physical form. After all, it's true that one is born of the other, while still remaining one. So, whether you break it down into humans' lives, cycles, or stages of development, whatever you call it, your life experience will be full of suffering until you achieve harmony in all aspects. And that means you will return to your original form, which is love and unity with all creation. So, my dear friend, enjoy your life, because life is a dream and dreams are dreams. My dear viewer, now please give yourself time to digest all this information and even come back to this video in a while. And I'm sure that eventually you will find that in the end, it all makes sense. The sense that we are all looking for. A sense that will allow us to close our project and thus achieve inner harmony. Please remember, you have been given the gift of life. So make it the best experience possible, my friend. And so at the end, I would just like to add that no matter what story about the creation we tell ourselves, no matter what we believe in, as long as this story makes sense to us, as long as we believe in it, as long as it gives meaning to our life, as long as it starts with love and it ends with love. And although it will be only one of an infinite number of potential realities, know that it will still be real. And it will be real because you believe in it. And so it is. I hope you now understand what the true concept of living in three-dimensional reality is. And if you really understand what our experience of life is, you certainly understand that you're the creator of it. And while it will take some time to fully reprogram your old beliefs, if we work on it together, I believe the process will become much easier and smoother. Therefore, I cordially invite you to my new series of episodes in which I will teach you how to live in a three-dimensional reality in order to achieve complete harmony in every aspect, so that by achieving inner harmony in our personal life, together we could manifest peace, love, mutual respect and justice in the external world. My friend, if we were once able to manifest into reality someone's negative perspective of life, it means that now we can manifest our positive idea of it. Remember this. And so at the end, I just want to thank you once again for watching, and until next time, hey my friend.